The rain poured relentlessly over the city, its rhythmic patter against the windows of Kingston Enterprises, creating a somber symphony. Inside the sleek, modern office, Evelyn Carter stood in the elevator, clutching her portfolio tightly. Her reflection in the mirrored walls showed a woman determined, yet nervous, her auburn hair pulled into a neat bun, her tailored blazer slightly wrinkled from the morning commute. Today was her first day as the new head of the creative department, a position she had worked tirelessly to earn. But Evelyn wasn't just here for the job. She was here to prove herself, to the company, to her family, and most importantly, to the man who had built this empire from the ground up, Alexander Kingston. Alexander was a name that carried weight in the business world. At 35, he was the youngest CEO to lead one of the most successful tech companies in the country. He was known for his sharp mind, ruthless efficiency, and a reputation for being cold and unapproachable. Stories of his icy demeanor and high expectations were legendary among employees, and Evelyn had heard them all. But she wasn't intimidated. Or at least, that's what she told herself. The elevator doors slid open, and Evelyn stepped into the executive floor. The air was thick with tension, the kind that came with working under a man like Alexander. She smoothed her blazer and walked toward the conference room, where her first meeting with the CEO was scheduled. He was already there when she entered, standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows with his back to her. Even from across the room, his presence was commanding. Tall, with broad shoulders and dark, tousled hair, he exuded an air of authority that made the room feel smaller. "Mr. Kingston," Evelyn began, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest. He turned slowly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. For a moment, he said nothing, simply studying her with an intensity that made her feel as though he could see straight through her. "You're late," he said finally, his voice low and edged with irritation. Evelyn blinked. The meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock. "It's 8:58. "I expect my team to be early," he replied, stepping closer. "Punctuality is a sign of respect, Ms. Carter. Or do you not value the opportunity you've been given?" His words were sharp, designed to cut, but Evelyn refused to flinch. She met his gaze head-on, her chin lifting slightly. "I value this opportunity more than you know, Mr. Kingston. But I also value fairness. And I don't believe 2 minutes constitutes lateness." A flicker of surprise crossed his features, quickly replaced by a smirk. "Confident, aren't you?" "I prefer the term capable," she shot back. The room fell silent, the tension between them crackling like static. Alexander took another step closer, his eyes narrowing. "We'll see about that." The weeks that followed were a battle of wills. Alexander was relentless, pushing Evelyn to her limits with impossible deadlines and demanding expectations. But Evelyn was no stranger to hard work. She poured her heart into every project, determined to prove herself. Their interactions were a mix of heated arguments and fleeting moments of mutual respect. Alexander was infuriating, his arrogance unmatched, but Evelyn couldn't deny the spark of admiration she felt for his brilliance. And though she would never admit it, there was something about the way he looked at her, like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve, that intrigued her. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Evelyn found herself alone in the office. The rest of the team had left hours ago, but she stayed behind to finish a presentation. As she gathered her things, she heard footsteps behind her. "Still here?" Alexander's voice echoed through the empty room. She turned to see him leaning against the doorway, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked different like this, less like the untouchable CEO and more like a man. "I could say the same to you," she replied, her tone lighter than usual. He stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over her. "You've been working late a lot lately." "So have you," she countered. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Touché. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the air between them charged with unspoken words. Then, without warning, Alexander closed the distance between them. His hand reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Evelyn's breath caught, her heart pounding in her chest. "What are you doing?" "Something I've wanted to do for a while," he murmured, his voice low and rough. And then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle or sweet. It was fierce, passionate, and utterly consuming. Evelyn's mind went blank, her hands gripping his shirt as she kissed him back with equal intensity. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not their arguments, not their roles, not the world outside. When they finally pulled apart, Evelyn was breathless, her world tilted on its axis. Alexander's eyes burned into hers, his expression unreadable. "This changes nothing," he said, his voice firm but tinged with something softer. Evelyn nodded, though her heart told a different story. Because deep down, she knew this changed everything. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Evelyn tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to that kiss. Alexander, for his part, seemed determined to maintain their professional distance, though she caught him watching her more than once when he thought she wasn't looking. Their dynamic shifted subtly. The arguments were still there, but they were laced with an undercurrent of something deeper, something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. One afternoon, Evelyn was called into Alexander's office for a meeting. She walked in to find him standing by the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Close the door," he said without turning around. She did as he asked, her heart racing. "You wanted to see me?" He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "I've been reviewing your work. It's impressive." Evelyn blinked, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you." But he continued, his tone sharpening. "There's always room for improvement. I expect nothing less than perfection from my team." She nodded, her earlier surprise replaced by determination. "I understand." Alexander studied her for a moment, then sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Why do you make this so difficult?" Evelyn frowned. "Make what difficult?" "This," he said, gesturing between them. "You, me, whatever this is." She took a step closer, her gaze steady. "I don't know what you want me to say, Alexander." His name on her lips seemed to break something in him. In an instant, he closed the distance between them, his hands cupping her face as he kissed her again. This time, it was softer, more tender, but no less intense. When they pulled apart, Evelyn's heart was pounding. "Alexander." "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted, his voice rough. "But I can't stop thinking about you." Evelyn reached up, her fingers brushing against his cheek. "Then don't stop." Their relationship blossomed in secret, a delicate balance of passion and restraint. They stole moments together, quick kisses in empty hallways, lingering glances across the boardroom, late-night conversations in his office. But the outside world was never far away, and the pressures of their professional lives threatened to tear them apart. Alexander's reputation was on the line, and Evelyn knew that their relationship could jeopardize everything he had worked for. But she also knew that she couldn't walk away, not when he had become such an integral part of her life. As they navigated the complexities of their feelings, they discovered a deeper connection, one that went beyond attraction and challenged them to confront their fears and vulnerabilities. One evening, after a particularly stressful day, Evelyn found herself standing on the rooftop of the building, the city lights stretching out before her. She needed a moment to breathe, to clear her head. Alexander found her there, his presence quiet but unmistakable. He stood beside her, his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I didn't know you came up here," he said, his voice soft. Evelyn smiled faintly. "It's my secret escape. Or at least it was." He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Do you ever feel like the weight of everything is too much?" She hesitated, then nodded. "All the time." Alexander reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. "You're not alone, Evelyn. Not anymore." Her heart swelled at his words, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Together, they learned that love wasn't about perfection. It was about finding someone who saw you for who you truly were and loved you anyway. And in the end, that was enough. As the weeks turned into months, Evelyn and Alexander found a rhythm that worked for them. They learned to navigate the challenges of their relationship, balancing their professional lives with the love they had found in each other. One evening, after a successful product launch that had been months in the making, the team gathered for a celebration. The office was alive with laughter and music, the stress of the past few weeks melting away. Evelyn stood at the edge of the room, a glass of champagne in her hand, watching as Alexander mingled with the team. He looked more relaxed than she had ever seen him, his usual stern expression replaced by a genuine smile. He caught her eye from across the room and made his way over, his gaze never leaving hers. "You did an incredible job," he said, his voice warm with pride. Evelyn smiled, her heart swelling at his words. "We did an incredible job. This was a team effort." Alexander shook his head. "You're the one who brought it all together. I couldn't have done this without you." Before she could respond, he took her hand and led her to the center of the room. The music slowed, and he pulled her into his arms, his touch gentle but firm. As they danced, Evelyn felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. Here, in his arms, she felt safe, cherished, and loved. "I've been thinking," Alexander said softly, his breath warm against her ear. "About us. About the future." Evelyn looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. "What about it?" He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I don't want to hide anymore. I want the world to know how much you mean to me." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Alexander, are you sure? What about the company? What about—" He silenced her with a kiss, his lips soft but insistent. When he pulled away, his eyes were filled with determination. "I've spent my entire life building this company, but it means nothing if I can't share it with you. You're my priority, Evelyn. Always." Tears filled her eyes as she realized the depth of his commitment. "I love you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "I love you too," he replied, his voice steady and sure. "And I'm ready to show the world that we're stronger together." The next morning, Alexander called a company-wide meeting. The employees gathered in the conference room, murmuring with curiosity about the unexpected announcement. Alexander stood at the front of the room, his hand clasped firmly in Evelyn's. He took a deep breath, then addressed the crowd. "I know there have been rumors, and I want to set the record straight. Evelyn and I are in a relationship. She's not just my partner in work, she's my partner in life." The room erupted in applause, the team's support overwhelming. Evelyn felt a surge of gratitude and relief, her heart swelling with love for the man beside her. As the meeting ended, Alexander turned to her, his eyes shining with pride. "No more hiding," he said, his voice firm. "From now on, we face everything together." Evelyn nodded, her heart full. Together. Their journey wasn't without challenges, but they faced them head-on, their love growing stronger with each passing day. Years later, as they stood on the rooftop of Kingston Enterprises, watching the sunset over the city, Evelyn couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd come. Alexander wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice soft. She smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Just how lucky I am to have you, to have this life." He kissed the top of her head, his touch tender. "I'm the lucky one, Evelyn. You've changed everything for me." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Evelyn knew that their love was a testament to the power of vulnerability, trust, and perseverance. They had built something beautiful, not just a company, but a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities. And as they stood there, hand in hand, Evelyn knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together. What do you think is the most important quality in a relationship? Trust, communication, or vulnerability? Or is it something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below.